Before we get into the video, I just wanted to say, you guys are getting 7 uploads this week, so yeah, this was not a planned recording. I just thought about doing this one at the last second, and I wanted to ask your guys' opinion early on in this video. What do you guys think about me doing a chapter analysis, going through all the chapters of all the books, like going all the way through, basically like a rereading? Let me know if you guys would like to see that or not. I know a lot of people have done that in the past on here, but let me know what your guys' thoughts would be on there. I kind of have looked at some of the way other YouTubers do it, and I have elements that I like and dislike. Like some YouTubers, I think, get way too off topic, and it kind of takes me out of the video. And then I think some people that do it also go way too in depth with the kind of analysis, where it's like, we're getting way too into, okay, it's a hill, so let me know if you guys want my kind of version of that. The chapter analysis would be kind of very similar to how I do the other ones in the series. Like I've done one on the Red Wedding, Renly's Peach, Purple Wedding, Jaime's scene in the bathtub, that whole scene, or that whole chapter. So yeah, let me know what you guys' thoughts on that, and I hope you guys all enjoyed the video.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. And today's video is actually kind of a video I decided to do at the last minute, but I had been planning on doing this kind of video series starting a while ago, but I just got to it. And if you guys know, I put up a poll talking about the best A Song of Ice and Fire book, and you guys resoundingly, over 50%, said Storm of Swords is your favorite or best book. And that makes a lot of sense. But in this video, and videos we're going to be doing every single week, I'm going to talk about why each of the 5 books could be the best book or the favorite book. This is going to be kind of an analysis of those books and each one individually. Today's will be on the first one, Game of Thrones, the first book that got us into this whole universe, and why I believe it has a very good shot to be the best Game of Thrones book and why it is for certain people. This was ranked the 2nd book for your guys' best. I think it had maybe 15% or something like that as of recording this video. All of the books besides A Storm of Swords had less than 20%, so that kind of tells you that the other 4 books are kind of split in opinion, but yeah. Before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow, and which I might like this content as well. And let's get into the video. So the first thing I want to talk about when we look at the Game of Thrones, the first book, is that it's very different from some of the other books, right? Whereas the first book kind of has some parallels to the 4th and 5th book, based upon the struggles of ruling, and we see how that ends up playing out by war breaking out by the end of the book. This book does a great job of introducing us into A Song of Ice and Fire. There's so much information that has to be kind of told to the readers, and this book does a great job. And I want to talk about a key couple things on where George is able to explain the universe and the world that he built without it feeling over just too much going on, right? If we look at where a lot of our characters end up, we start in Winterfell, and all of the characters kind of come there, and then they all spread out, and we start to kind of see the rest of the world through their eyes, which I think is a very good idea, instead of just having all of these characters in different places and then having them meet. I think all of them meeting in one spot is a very good way to open up this book. Now, another thing I want to talk about in this book is probably the best prologue chapter of all 5 of the books. I think it's the best one. It's where we have our introduction to the others. It's one of the very few times we have an interaction with the others. I think we have less than 5 actual interactions with the others in the books. So this is a very standout chapter, and kind of sets the tone for this, where there is some magic in this world, but it also is grounded in realistic kind of settings, and if you make bad choices, you will die. And we'll see that as we progress through this book, because this book is kind of the introduction into what this kind of world's going to be. Like, what are the themes? What are all these other things? And this is the first one, right? We see that the others are something that not a lot of people still believe in, as we see through Rhaemar Royce and all that. And we see kind of how this threat has loomed and has kind of gone unnoticed for a long time. And that'll be explained, more as we go through the book series. But I think it's a great way to introduce. I think the first 2 chapters do a very good job of introducing us into the world And the big thing for me is something that the show, I think, forgot to do, is that the main part of the books and the main threat is the others. So for me, when you look at the big threat and how the show did it, the others should have been the big threat, not Cersei at the end. So I think it's a good way of pointing out what the actual big villain of the entire series is going to be, and something that is going to be building up to in the books. Now, another thing I want to talk about is this book does a very good job of not getting too complicated right away. From the beginning, we have the characters we believe are the good characters and the characters we think are the bad characters. Now, we do see some characters where they, Tyrion, he's a Lannister. He's supposed to be a bad one. He's in the Lannister family. But you can't help but like him. He's witty and all that stuff and all that. So I think this book does a good job of slowly kind of devolving into the morally gray area with a lot of these characters. But we start out kind of not on that. And I think that's a good idea, because I think you want to have your characters where you think they're the good or bad, and then kind of as the series goes on, mix them. I don't think you want to have them mixed, not knowing who they really are, and then figuring out who the good and bad characters are. So I think George does a very good job in that way too, and it's another reason why I think that this book is a good start to the series and very strong. I also think another reason why people might think this would be the best book would be the mystery element. It's something we don't have a lot in the books, where yes, there are mysteries and stuff, but this whole book in and of itself is a mystery. The threat of the others is kind of a mystery to the wall. Everything going on in King's Landing is a mystery. We don't know what is going on there. We don't know, how did Jon Arryn die? What's this whole thing going on? What did Jon Arryn actually die for? And uncovering the truth by the end of the book, or I guess the midpoint of the book. And I think it's really strong the way that book is kind of formatted and themed in that way. Whereas the mid to middle two books, they're more focused on the war and stuff like that, and how people gain power and the, I guess, atrocities of war. And then book 4 and 5 are kind of about the new, I guess, regimes trying to rule and the struggles of that. So book 1 is very different in that regard to the other books in that way. Also, if we look at our main characters and how everyone departs from Winterfell, the only character that is really a major character in the first book that is not at Winterfell at the beginning is Dany. So you have Daenerys, and Daenerys, for me, I've talked about, is not one of my favorite characters, but I do think this is a very strong book for her. I think book 2 is not a great book for her, but I think book 1 is very strong for her, where we see her kind of being this kind of scared girl and kind of coming into her own into this book. Now, she's not fully, the queen, mother of dragons is by at this point, but she gains confidence. She starts to step up to people that are abusing her, like her brother, and she comes into her own as a Khaleesi. And by the end of the whole book, we see her, hatching the dragons and all that stuff. One of the most powerful book scenes, and even show, I would go so far as to say one of the best show scenes as well in the entire series. So Dany, I love her character arc in this book, and I think this is one of her stronger books. People might argue with me with Storms, but I think this is definitely up there as being one of the better Dany books. So I think I wanted to point her out in this book because I think she's very good in this book. I'm not a personal fan of she has a lot of kind of sex scenes in this book, I guess, and it is kind of necessary to the plot to kind of establish Khal Drogo and Dany's relationship, and then also her getting pregnant. So again, I don't have as big of a problem as in this book, as I'll talk about when we get to Dance with all of her stuff with Daario and all that. So we'll talk about when we get there, but this book is very, hit the mic. This book is very good for Dany, and I also want to talk about Jon. I think Jon has a very good book in this one. I think a lot of the characters are strong in this book. I just think we have so much Ned that a lot of those characters don't get as much time as they do in the future books, but it makes sense, right? Ned is our main character. But Jon is somewhat kind of similar to Daenerys, where Jon is a character that doesn't really know who he's supposed to be in this book. And that's something he struggles with as the books go on as well, with his own self-identity. And we see kind of this guy who feels very much an outsider, and it leads him to kind of make a decision that's probably not the best decision. He ends up going to the Wall, somewhere where he thought would be kind of an honorable place to go, and for the Starks it kind of is. Now, Jon is not a Stark, but it's a good, I guess, way to introduce Jon and us, the audience, into the Wall. And that's one of the things I want to talk about is how all of these characters go, leave Winterfell. We have Jon who goes to the Wall. We have Tyrion that goes to the Wall. So you have two of our main POV characters kind of go that way. And then we also have Ned who ends up going south. And then we'll see kind of Arya and Sansa as well in their POVs with Ned. And then we'll also have Bran and Catelyn in this book as well. And we'll see how Catelyn kind of moves around Westeros. And she is our biggest character, I feel like, besides Ned, on giving us more information into the world, where we'll get to see the Vale through her, the Crossroad Inns again, but in a deeper look. She has kind of a different look going into King's Landing than Ned does. So we have a lot of interesting stuff going on with Catelyn. But getting back to Jon, we have this where he comes into the Wall and he sees kind of how his brothers are not people like maybe him or people he's grown up with. And I think one of the best kind of things we get in this is when Jon is beating all of these brothers and not understanding and being too young to understand that, these people don't have any training, right? And a lot of these people are here unjustly, where they probably don't deserve to be here compared to other people like, lords or something that are doing terrible things to their own people. So we see kind of Jon come to that realization and all that, and we see Jon kind of stepping up for Sam as well. So I think Jon is another person that has a very strong arc in this book as well, and I think it gets built upon in the next couple books. But this is definitely a very strong start for Jon, and I can definitely see why you would love Jon in this book. Now, talking about our other main POV character with Jon, Tyrion. Now, Tyrion is, I think, on rereads, he's definitely the most interesting POV in my opinion. But on your first one, it's definitely Ned, just because of King's Landing and all the uncovering of the mystery. But Tyrion goes pretty much everywhere in this book except for King's Landing. Tyrion, besides Catelyn, is the other person that really is big on the world building, where we see Tyrion go to the Wall, we see Tyrion go to the Vale, like I said, with, Catelyn and all that, going down into the Riverlands as well. And we see Tyrion being this Lannister character where we don't know how we're supposed to feel about him, right? Because the Lannisters are bad. We're not supposed to like them. But Tyrion, seeing how he's able to talk his way out of so many situations, how smart he is. And when you have a bunch of characters where they're not really developed characters on how to play the Game of Thrones or how to outwit people, it's refreshing to see, because we have Ned, who's not that character at all. We have Catelyn, who I almost think she thinks she's smart, but she's really not. We see a lot of dumb decisions that she does in the books. And we have Jon, who's just way too young to be doing those type of things. Same with Dany. Same thing with Sansa and Arya as well. They're just worried about other things. They're too young for all that stuff. So Tyrion's the one kind of adult character that we get in this book that really is smart, and we see him kind of use that to his advantage. And we getting to meet Tywin through Tyrion's eyes and seeing how crazy Lysa is and all that stuff. Tyrion, again, is another character that provides a lot of the comic relief in this book, as well as just being someone that is very smart and witty. And he, again, this is not his best book by any means. I think in Clash, I think he has his best book, and then also in Storms, he has a very, good book. But again, a very strong opening to Tyrion and kind of showing us who he is as a character. He has a famous line to Jon where he's like, use all the negative things they're saying to you, like bastard, as a shield. Don't let, as armor. Don't let people use that against you. And that's really kind of how Tyrion is. Tyrion sometimes plays into the imp role quite a bit, and it ends up getting him in trouble when the trial comes about. But it's something that's interesting, and it's something that's very deep to Tyrion. And we also, I believe, we learned that, Tyrion's backstory with Tysha, something that they kind of didn't do in the show, but it's something that's very big to Tyrion's character, and we start to learn about that in this book. So that's kind of Tyrion. And then we have our next major, one, which would be Catelyn, which I've talked about a bit. She's very similar to Tyrion in, they have a certain part of the book together. And Catelyn is one of our more main characters in this first book. And she is kind of how would I want to say this? She is Cersei, but just not as bitchy and or crazy. Like I think Catelyn is someone that believes she's really smart and all that, and she really isn't. She makes a lot of bad decisions, and she probably has one of her worst ones in this first book. But it's interesting the way we see the world through Catelyn's eyes. We have a lot of world building through Catelyn. Again, I wouldn't say this is Catelyn's best book. I would say the second is a really good book for her as well, with everything with Renly and Stannis and all that. But again, a very strong basis for where Catelyn comes. And I think the biggest character that we need to talk about is going to be everything kind of surrounding Ned, Sansa, and Arya in this book. So Ned in this book is the main POV. I think he has 15 chapters in this book. I think I'm not exactly how many chapters there are. There might be like 70-ish, but he has a ton of chapters in this book. And it's a big reason why. He's the head of kind of the good guys on your first reading and all that stuff. And we see him kind of starting to puzzle together the mystery. What happened with Jon Arryn? What's been going on in King's Landing? And we see the honorable approach to the Game of Thrones, something that's very different from the next book, where we're going to see Tyrion doing kind of the exact opposite of Ned. So it's really cool to establish how certain people play the game, and Ned kind of coming into this game that he really is not ready for. I've made a video talking about how I don't think Ned was as stupid as people think he was, but he definitely did make some bad choices. If you want to see that video, I probably will have a card up on why I don't think Ned was really that stupid. But yeah, we see Ned, and Ned is really our biggest POV into King's Landing. What's all going on there? What's happening with Dany and all that? What's happening with Catelyn capturing Tyrion and all that stuff? Ned is very much our main character for this first book. And Ned is a great character to start out the first book with. And it's the idea that the good characters do not always win. If they make bad decisions, they are going to die. And we see how Ned's honor and his loyalty makes him do bad and wrong decisions that end up getting him killed, right? And what I think is great about this book and how it all sets this up for the major kind of finale of the book is there's this one chapter that I think is very good and kind of summarizes how George almost plays with your emotions. Is the last Ned chapter we get, where Varys kind of comes to Ned and he's basically saying, do all these things for the realm, for, peace and all that stuff, and to kind of, almost manipulating Ned into making a decision that Varys wants him to. And we see that Ned kind of thinks about Sansa, and he more or less accepts this decision, right? He's like, okay, I'll go along with this, even though it goes against everything that I stand for. And we kind of think in our heads, like, okay, everything's going to be okay, right? Ned's going to be fine. He's going to do this. He's going to get out of here, and he's going to go to the wall, and he's going to be with Jon. Or maybe he won't go with this, and he'll end up with Robb anyway. And at the same time, we also see that Robb is making his army coming south, and we're like, okay, well, Robb's gonna get him out. Robb and Catelyn, are good characters. They're gonna break Ned free. Everything's gonna be okay. And then, we see Ned get his head chopped off, and you kind of see what kind of book series this is. This is not a series where the good guys they have plot armor, they have this or that. No, they die. It's a very good way to set the tone for the books. And I think a lot of people, even though this happens, they're still saying, okay, well, this just means Robb is going to be the guy that gets to be the redeemer. He's going to be the guy that comes of age and the hero of the story. We see that doesn't happen either. But Game of Thrones, to me, does a great way of setting the pace for the story, setting up things in book one that aren't even, we're not even sure what's, like Ned and Ashara or Rhaegar and Lyanna, whichever theory you believe in. A lot of that comes from book one. Think about how much in book one is kind of set up and paid off in like book three or even the later books after that. There are things that happen in book one that are still talked about in book five. You know, that is the beauty of Game of Thrones. And this book definitely does a ton of setup and a lot of work. And that is one of the bigger reasons why I would kind of point that out. And talking about kind of our last two POV chapters, I hope I got all the POV chapters right. I'm just kind of going off of memory. Sansa and Arya, I think, are perfect POV characters to have with Ned. Because on one hand, we have Arya, which is kind of the Lyanna side of the Starks. And then we kind of have Sansa, who's very much a Tully. She doesn't take a lot from the Starks at all. One of the reasons I don't think she is going to be the ruler in the North, just based upon kind of how she acts, who she is as a person. But when you look at these two characters, they're polar opposites, right? Arya is a character that is very tomboyish, wants to be kind of a sword fighter, a water dancer, you know, all that. And Sansa's the opposite. She just wants to marry Joffrey. She wants to be a high lady, the queen. She wants all these other things that, you know, normal girls want. And Arya is very much kind of this pragmatic character, someone that understands how to survive, someone that is more of a rational thinker, while Sansa is more ladylike. She thinks about those things. She doesn't think about, you know, if she was in a situation where it was life or death, what is she going to do, right? Because and this is even more evident when we see when Arya escapes, right? The Lannisters, after, you know, Syrio Forel kind of has the little thing. But when Arya is surviving, she thinks so much about, hey, you know, I can take some of my old belongings, sell them, try to get some coin that'll give me some food and maybe a horse. I can try to get out of here or something like that. And when we get to Sansa and when she thinks about what Arya did and how she would try to escape, she's like, there's no way. She'd have no idea what to do. She would probably end up dead. And that's the stark difference between... that was a good one. That was a stark difference. Okay. But that is the difference between Arya and Sansa. And I think it's a great parallel to have. And we even see this when Arya and Sansa kind of get in their fight about, you know, when they get in that fight with Joffrey, where Joffrey nearly kills Arya. I also did a video about that last week about, you know, or I guess actually that's actually this week. So if you want to see a video I'm going to have this week about, you know, Ned and kind of Arya and Sansa and that whole thing where Joffrey was trying to kill Arya and Sansa still is not willing to tell the truth and say that. It shows you how disconnected the two sisters really are. And I kind of love that contrast between the two characters. And we even get so much foreshadowing in this book as well, with kind of the stag kind of killing the direwolf and all that. And we even see things like Lady ends up dying, which can be signified as a Stark is going to die in this book, which Ned ends up doing. And it also kind of shows Sansa's character, where Sansa really is not much of a Stark. But there's a lot of that in this book, and I could go on and on about that. I just think that this book is a very strong book because it introduces a lot of the core themes and values. And one of the bigger ones is the threat of the others and the idea of people not taking it seriously, having all of these petty infighting and civil wars, while this major problem is just lingering in the corner, getting worse and worse and worse. It's the whole idea that George kind of uses that as kind of a climate change reference, where regardless of how you think about that in real life, that is what George has kind of referenced to. And it's kind of this idea that nobody's paying attention to it, and eventually it's going to be too big of a problem that we're not going to be able to solve it. And I think that is where a lot of people believe that the others may win, that all of this has been going on for so long that we actually are not going to be able to stop the others, or something like a climate change, for instance. So I think that's what George could be building to. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the others will be stopped. I just think there's going to be a terrible cost to stopping them. And yeah, so this is the video. I could go on and on about all the major plot lines in this book, but this book to me does a great way of introducing the story, and it is a great way to kickstart everything and talk about the main themes, the main ideas of A Song of Ice and Fire as a whole. So yeah, let me know if you guys liked this video. I will probably put out the next video, which will be on A Clash of Kings next week. And now that'll be a good one. That is actually my favorite book. It was actually, I think, 4th, if I'm not mistaken, on the voting for your guys' favorite book, which kind of surprised me, because it is my favorite, but you know. So we'll have that book, or not that book, that video up next week talking about that book specifically, and then we'll have, you know, we'll go down the line. But thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.